At Framingham State, we encourage students to think big when it comes to the future. This morning's commencement speaker, a proud member of the class of '87, is someone we hold up as an example of everything that is possible when you have the energy and drive to pursue your passions. Michael Powers was one of the founding team members at YouTube. As a product manager on the original team, he was the creator of YouTube channels, video contests, and branded channels. YouTube was Michael's 5th startup company. 3 of the first 4 had failed, taking with them his life savings. But October 9, 2006, just over 1 year after YouTube's inception, it was purchased by Google for $1.6 billion, a price that would turn out to be a great bargain as it kicked off the online video revolution. Following Google's acquisition, Michael moved to sales, where he led a team to build engaging ways for advertisers to connect to YouTubers. Over the next 3 years, revenue grew from a few $1 million to almost $1 billion. Today, Michael is an active angel investor in more than 10 companies, including Cambridge-based TaskRabbit and Turning Art. He's working on his 6th startup, a mentoring and coaching messenger called Brighter Me, and he's the senior vice president and general manager at CBS Interactive, where he runs the games division. We are so proud of all that Michael has accomplished in graduating from Framingham State, and we are honored to have him here today to give our graduate commencement address. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Michael Powers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, esteemed members of the faculty, parents, partners, friends and family. Most of all, thank you, graduates, for inviting me to share this day with you after all your hard work. I also want to thank my father, Fred Powers, who was very proud when he knew I was going to speak here at this graduation. Unfortunately, he passed away in January, so he can't be here. But I want to dedicate this talk to him. I graduated from Framingham State in 1987 in computer science. That was a year before the graduate program started, so then it was called Framingham State College, not Framingham State University. It's amazing to see how far this university has grown. I worked all through my school years. I even went an extra year because I was working and taking fewer classes. But when I graduated from here, I left without a lot of debt. And that allowed me to take some risks that I don't think I would have taken if I had a few $100,000 in debt. If you've been watching any of the HBO series Silicon Valley, they get many of the characters and the situations straight out of what's happening out on the West Coast. They poke fun at some of the startup founders and how earnest they are and how they all think that they're changing the world, even if what they're working on is minimal messaging protocols and compression algorithms. Now, some startup ideas do change the world. Pretty soon, we'll have self-driving cars. And we'll also have an app that will allow us to talk to each other in whatever language we choose to talk. And it'll all happen in real time. Now, I was drawn to startups because I saw a way for the internet to connect people so they could be more creative and they could be more emotionally connected across boundaries, country boundaries, state boundaries, generational boundaries. Today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories from my travels in the startup world. In 2nd grade, I was standing in line to go into my homeroom, and I noticed that some of my hair was falling out. It was a shock to me, and I went home and I talked to my parents, and over the next couple of months, all my hair fell out. And they told me that I had a condition called alopecia areata, which my father had as well. Now, I felt completely exposed and embarrassed. My parents did what they could to help. One thing they did was get a wig for me. Unfortunately, at the time, there were no wigs for children, so they got me a woman's wig. I was so attached to that wig that I used to fall asleep with it and wake up with it. Now, when I was 9, I worked up the courage to go to Boy Scout camp. I carefully chose which activities I would do. I especially avoided swimming. We slept 2 to a tent on top of a platform out in the middle of the woods. And 2 days in, it started to rain like cats and dogs. I was a restless sleeper, so in the middle of the night, I rolled over and I fell out the side of my tent into a giant puddle. I was also a very heavy sleeper, so it took me a few minutes to wake up. And during that time, my wig fell off and floated downstream off into the woods. You can imagine how I felt when I woke up. I just wanted to crawl under the nearest rock. I quietly tiptoed over to the scout leader's tent. I whispered to him what had happened. To my dismay, he rang the dinner bell and woke up my entire troop. He sent them off with flashlights and said, "Go find his wig." So, an hour later, someone found it. They came back and they had it on the top of a stick. And it looked like a dead raccoon with leaves and twigs hanging out, all the matted hair. A couple hours later, my parents arrived with a replacement sleeping bag, but that was the only wig I had. I wanted to go home with my parents. One of the older kids came over and said, "Hey, you should stay. I'll be your buddy. I'll stick with you." And then all the other kids came over and said, "Yeah, we'll stick with you too. Don't worry about it." So I did stay. And true to their word, they did not let me out of their sight for the rest of the 4 days, and I had the time of my life. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what does this have to do with startups in Silicon Valley? Well, on the first day of the very first startup I joined, a startup called Da Vinci Time and Space. It has to be the nerdiest startup name you've probably ever heard. I sat in a conference room with 7 other people. The founders had us go around one by one and tell our most embarrassing childhood story. And I told that one, and there was just silence in the room. Now, some of those people are still my friends to this day that I was in that first startup with. I know their childhood stories, they know mine. We spent 24/7 together making that startup work. That's the promise of the startup world, is that you come together as a team and you try to make the future happen, and you learn a lot about each other in that process. And I learned from the camp and from that experience that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to expose yourself, it's okay to tell your most embarrassing story, and that actually helps you connect to other people. Now, what took me to Silicon Valley, out to the San Francisco area, was that I was accepted into a psychology doctorate program. So after I left here, I worked for a couple years as an engineer, and then I decided I was going to go become a therapist. I wanted to figure out how people worked a little more than I wanted to figure out how programs worked. So to pay off my graduate school debts, I worked first at Xerox and then at Apple Computer. This is in the dark days before Steve Jobs came back. And I paid down my school debt. Right at that moment is when the internet started to take off, and I was right there in the town where it was happening. I decided to postpone my graduate degree and get into startups. So I was in that first startup, and maybe 2 months into it, one of the engineers who I really respected came to me and said, "Look, I'm leaving this company." Now, he'd only been there 2 months, and he's like, "I'm leaving this company. I'm going to go to another company called NetMosaic. I think you're great. You should really come with me." Now, I felt like I had just taken the job. I should really stay where I was. So I said, "No, it's okay. I'll stay here for a little while." Well, a year later, do you know what that company became? Netscape. It sold. My friend became a multimillionaire. That was missed opportunity number 1. A year after that, I had my own startup. It's called Flatland. It's a little bit like Minecraft. It's a little earlier than Minecraft. As I was getting my company off the ground, another engineer from that earlier startup came to me and said, "Hey, starting a new company. It's a site where you can put up things and you can sell them under auction. People can bid on them." Yeah. That was eBay. Missed opportunity number 2. Yeah. So the dot-com bubble popped a couple years later. My company failed. I had to lay off 15 people, some of my closest friends. And the wave was over. So there I was. I'd been at ground zero for the biggest new industry in my lifetime. I left behind becoming a psychologist. I had taken out my 401k, used it for my company. At the end of it, I didn't have a job, I didn't have a retirement account, and I felt pretty burned out. There's a mantra in Silicon Valley which basically says, fail fast, fail often. And I was certainly doing that. Now, most people I know do many companies and fail many times before they stumble into a winning company. I know that now. I didn't know that then. But doing anything new means placing many bets and learning as quickly as you can. This brings me to my third story. When everything crashed, I scraped up the pennies that I had, and I went with a couple friends backpacking in South America. I wanted to recover, I wanted to think, I wanted to regain my strength. Now, there's a quote by Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth, and he talks about the hero's journey. In the quote, he says, "We must be willing to get rid of the life that we've planned so that we can have the life that's waiting for us." I came back from traveling, and I tried to find a safe job at a big company, but nobody was hiring. And the companies that would give me an interview basically said, "Oh, you're a startup guy. You're going to leave in a year. We're not hiring you." So I was left with only 2 choices. Either I had to start another company again, or I started scouring Craigslist. It just so happened that I found a post on Craigslist, which was by a co-founder of PayPal. He was starting a new incubator with a bunch of new companies inside of it, and he was looking for programmers. Now, I was leaning towards starting my own company, but I had a very good friend who came to me and said, "Look, you tried this before, you didn't have all the knowledge, so you failed. How about this time you go join a team that's done it before, just a year ago. Join them and learn from them. The worst case is that you'll have a bigger network, and you'll probably find your next big thing." I did join that incubator. It had 3 companies in it. One had 3 people. It was called Yelp. The other one only had me. It was called Slide at that point. And the third one had about 6 people. And I don't actually remember its name. It was doing some kind of search engine optimization thing. That company, a couple months later, I walked into the office and they were all gone. They had disappeared, and nobody was talking about them. A couple months after that, one of the people who worked at that company came to me and he said, "Hey, we all left to start this other company. It's going to be a new way to share videos. It's called YouTube." This time I said yes. Yep. Do you know what the first idea for YouTube was? It was actually a dating site. The idea is that you'd post videos of yourself, and then other people would rate you from 0 to 10. Didn't quite work out. Go figure. YouTube quickly pivoted. That's Silicon Valley speak for we just failed really fast. And they started to get into viral videos and sharing things that would spread over email far and wide. It was a dream startup. It's what I always thought a startup could be. Awesome team. They know how to do everything right at the right moment. They scaled it. We went from 10 million video views to 100 million video views a week later to 1 billion a few weeks after that. About 10 months later, I walk into work, and there's Eric Schmidt and Larry Page welcoming us to work. We had just been sold to Google. It felt surreal after 10 years of working in so many companies that had gone by the wayside. I remember calling my parents and just being on cloud nine. All of us at the company were a bit stunned too, so we went out to celebrate. We walked across the street and we went to a TGI Fridays. Yeah, where else would you celebrate? After the buyout, it takes about 3 months to get approved, everything got shuffled. Basically, my job was given to somebody else. I was put in sales, and I had never done sales before. But I had to stay there because they bought the company so early that none of us had any stock yet. So if I left, I was walking away with nothing. So I had to put my head down, probably work harder than I ever have in my life, and I had to learn how to do sales, or how to at least be valuable to sales. And I worked there for another 3.5 years, and I learned so much. It turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me, to get shuffled over to a new area and have to kind of scrape my way up again. It gave me more in my resume. Now I could actually build product and I could build revenue, and it really gave me the job that I have today as a general manager. When I first moved to California, I took up pottery. I was working on the wheel with clay. It's very peaceful. Now, the first step when you work on the wheel is to take the clay and try to get it to be centered on the wheel. And the wheel's spinning pretty fast, and that clay really wants to push back on you. If you push it too hard, or you put too much water on it, it collapses. But after months and months of trying, there's a day where you're pushing and it snaps into place, and you can just feel it. And from that point, you can make a cup or a vase or a pitcher. Anything is possible. It's called centering. What a great metaphor for what I was learning all through my startup journey. And what I think we all learn in life is how to find our center. And you know it, it feels right when you're there. By getting these graduate degrees, each of you has shown that you're willing to take risks to make a better future, to do more in your field, to do better in your life. If you're fortunate, you have mothers, fathers, spouses and partners, children, friends, who are cheering you on and helping you pay attention when you make those big decisions. Like my Boy Scout experience, allow yourself to be different and face your worst fears. Like my story of near misses, fail often, fail fast. And finally, like my time at YouTube, pay attention, especially when things are going well. Learn and pivot. I'm excited for you today. You finished a challenge that very few people in the world have finished. Now find your center again and go start your next big thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Framingham State confers honorary degrees on those who have made special contributions throughout their lives. Recipients generally fall into two categories. First, people who have been closely associated with the university, its students, faculty, or alumni. And second, people who have made outstanding contributions to education, to our community, and to humanity. Today, we're honored to present an honorary degree to Michael Powers. The honorary degree will be conferred by Dick Logan, Chair of the Board of Trustees. Chair Logan, I present to you Michael Powers to receive the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa.
To all who may read this, greetings. Hereby it is certified that the trustees of Framingham State University, in whom the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Department of Higher Education, by legislative action, have vested power to confer appropriate degrees, have this day conferred on Michael Powers, the degree of Doctor of Science, honoris causa.